Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for teams building on-chain. I'm your host, Kelly Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, a leading provider of crypto communications and PR strategy, and founder of BITWIRE, the modern newswire reimagined for today's comms professionals. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in our space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leadership. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR.
Hi, I'm Nikki Brown, Chief Strategy Officer at Melrose PR, guest hosting today's episode with Kelsey Ruiz, Head of Communications at Aztec Labs, where she leads PR for the leading privacy-focused Ethereum Layer 2 protocol, Aztec. Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. So I started my career back in 2014. I've been doing comms and PR for over 10 years now. I got involved through hackathons, through Angel Hack. So I like to say we made hackathons cool back in the day. I was fresh out of college and it was a 7-person startup at the time. I had no idea what a hackathon was. But started attending those and walking around, talking with the developers. And that's really just fell in love with working with tech innovation, early stage founders. And it wasn't until about 2018 I started to see a lot of blockchain technology incorporated into most of the winning prototypes that were coming out of those hackathons. And so that's when I kind of started to look more at the blockchain sphere. And so I officially made the leap at the very tail end of 2019. I joined Ethereum Classic Labs as their senior PR manager. I didn't really know what I was fully getting myself into at the time. If you've been in the space for some time, you probably know Ethereum Classic. There's a lot of fun stories coming out of that if you're doing comms and PR for them. So I was there for a year during the year that they had 351% attacks. And so it really accelerated the rate at which I had to learn about the technology, how quickly I had to create relationships with reporters. And so even though, stressful crisis comm situation, it really was great move for me career-wise. And then after about a year there, I was recruited by Aztec Network. They're part of the Cosmos ecosystem. Shout out to all my Cosmos friends. I love the Cosmos ecosystem. Just feels very neutral. But I was head of comms there for 2 years, and they're a peer-to-peer marketplace for cloud compute. So I learned a ton about the infrastructure level. I was there for their mainnet launch, which was also a ton of fun. And then after 2 years at Aztec Network, I went to Consensus. I always felt like as I spent more time in the industry, I started feeling like doing a round at Consensus was kind of like an initiation into the industry. It was almost like going to Harvard for blockchain and crypto. And so I really wanted to get the experience working within the Ethereum ecosystem, coming from Ethereum Classic initially as well. And so I joined Consensus as their global PR lead, specifically for developer initiatives and tooling. And then that is what kind of brought me over to Aztec. I was at Consensus for the launch of Linea, and seeing that really go from seed to scale really made me excited about ZK technology, privacy. Started diving more into the kind of the issue of privacy, and that's when I joined Aztec. And that brings me kind of to present day as head of comms.
Amazing. You've had quite the background of experiences in this space, and as we say, you're definitely an OG in the crypto PR world. I guess starting where we are now with you as head of comms at Aztec. At the time that you joined, what were sort of the big picture goals for Aztec's presence and visibility, and how did you approach pursuing those objectives in the lead up to this big testnet launch that you guys just announced recently?
Yeah. Well, so I joined, I think it was about 8 months ago. I feel like in blockchain, you never, 8 months also feels like you've been here one day. So I feel like it's flown by. But when I first joined, I joined under Claire Cart, who has been such an amazing mentor. And it was really just us. And our kind of like first marching orders was to build out the marketing team. And so that was really such a big area of focus for us, is like, we need people, and we need people bad. We need good people. How do we find those people? What people do we need, right? Like, do we need a community person first and foremost? Do we need a product person first and foremost? Like, those were conversations we really had to kind of get into the weeds of, and quickly. And so that was one of our biggest mandates when we first joined, was to essentially build out the marketing function so that we had a team for our go-to-market strategy. And at the same time, we're fully auditing every single thing that we can. Aztec had been around for 8 years. And so we're looking really kind of like in the historical logs of like, what blogs have they pushed out? What has their social media historically looked like? Past speaking engagements, things like that. And then we're also building the strategy of like, what is the go-to-market for this? And for me, from like a PR and comms lens, I was really concerned about keeping Aztec like top of mind pre-product launch and pre-product market fit. So that was kind of my biggest area of focus when it comes to like the PR and comms front.
Amazing. And in the lead up to, this big testnet launch that was very successful for you guys, what were some of the strategies and approaches that you deployed to, keep Aztec top of mind among those target audience groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, first and foremost, and kind of going back to your previous question, we brought on a PR agency. Like it takes an army, it truly does. You cannot do it all by yourself. And so we brought on Melrose PR, and you guys really helped us kind of insert ourselves into current conversations that were happening at that time. And so, I don't know, we laid a lot of groundwork pre-product market fit. We really wanted to build relationships with reporters. And for me, it's like it's so important to build those organically. Like going into a networking event where a reporter is going to be there with no agenda, like genuinely just to see like, hey, what are you working on? And actually care about what their answer is, and then go back and be like, how can I relate this to what I'm working on, versus just going in of like testnet's coming up, almost like a shark in the water of like, who can I find? I really don't work on like that kind of train of thought. Like at a networking event, I'm going in asking, what's on the docket for the year? What are you excited to write about? Asking those kinds of questions, and then doing the homework later at home. So keeping those relationships just kind of like well-oiled, reaching out and just like genuinely caring what they're working on and how they're doing, I think really goes a long way. We massaged the messaging quite a bit. Like Aztec has been around for 8 years. And I think when it comes to PR, like you can people can see narratives in a positive or a negative light. And so we did a lot of like deep dives into this timeline. For me, I always looked at the 8-year timeline as like, this is a positive thing because they're actually building a real product with a real strategy. It's not vaporware. They have a robust product roadmap. They have a coding language as well that fits into the network once that is live. So there was a lot to work with in terms of narrative. And it really, it just seemed like we were not marketing vaporware, which is a good place to be as a marketer and a comms person within Web3. And as I'm sure you know, Nikki, that can sometimes be hard to find.
For sure. Yeah. No, and you guys are in a really unique position in the crypto ecosystem of being the leading Ethereum-based layer 2 focused on privacy. You're right that that 8 years of building the tech is a real positive differentiator of ensuring that everything is operating at the highest level of quality and security and all of that upon launch. But let's talk about the testnet launch. We all know, being professionals in this space, that testnet launches are not something that always get a lot of attention. But Aztec did, and was very successful in generating a lot of coverage. So what do you think led to that success? What were, some of the key ingredients behind that win?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like it's not super easy to get testnet coverage, especially in an industry that it feels like, the news cycle is lasting like only a couple hours. But I think laying the groundwork that we laid ahead of time really, really helped. Like talking with these reporters, getting interviews for the founders, Zach and Joe, in advance, even if they were just like off the record, hi, nice to meet you conversations, really, really helped. And then everyone was kind of waiting around of when's testnet going to be. I also think the timeline helped us a little bit in terms of like that 8-year building. I think people were really curious to be like, okay, it's finally here. Let's learn more about it. There's a lot of intricacies that come along with building a fully decentralized network. So I think people wanted to dive into the nuts and bolts there. But also, yeah, I mean, what we're building is super unique. And I think people are just excited to learn more about like how it works. Even internally, I mean, no one has launched a fully decentralized network. There's a lot that goes into it. And so I think people are really curious as like how that is being done. At the same time, I think that the relationship building aspect was just so key. Like people really like Zach. A lot of folks got to meet him in Denver. We hosted a press dinner that was like absolutely no pitching, just like please come and eat a lovely meal and connect with the team. And also like Zach's really interesting to talk to. He's really brilliant. And so I think at that time, like folks realized I'm going to keep my eye on this project. And yeah, it really just helped in terms of like getting all these folks' attention, number one. And then number two, the narrative, like privacy is such, it's like of the moment right now. Like 2025 really is the year of privacy. And I feel like people wanted to see how we were kind of like leading on that front. I think privacy within blockchain and crypto still feels like relatively new-ish. Like people are like, how do you define privacy in Web3? And so I think people were curious from that standpoint. But yeah, truly, like we're blown away by the testnet coverage. I mean, once that first domino, the CoinDesk article fell, it kind of just seemed like then everyone else wanted to write about it as well. So, I mean, the morning of, like, we were all up on a war room at like 4:30 a.m. Because I'm based on the West Coast, and so we were all up at 4:30 a.m. And being up, number one, and having those inbounds come in, being able to get back to them really quickly, all of that really kind of feeds into getting that coverage, securing that coverage, and making sure that relationship is good. Because if someone's reaching out to you and you're not up because you went back to bed, it's kind of like you literally snooze, you lose. So just being up, being super dialed in, being responsive, like all of those things really helped in all of the coverage that came after the secured embargo that we had first secured with CoinDesk.
I think that you're articulating a lot of great strategies here for other PR professionals to keep in mind of, the importance of building those relationships in advance. And then, being ready, being ready when the moment arises, right? To be responsive so that you kind of don't let those opportunities slide when they're playing out in real time. But also just you said it, where this is a very interesting moment, it feels like, for privacy more broadly in our culture, where I think it's becoming clear to people, even outside of crypto, that privacy matters, even in the context of all these AI tools that are collecting data on us constantly. And so it's kind of like it was the perfect storm in a way of relationships in place with the media, being ready, and then this sort of cultural moment in a way that we were all able to tap into. What other achievements would you like to highlight, in the comms side in your role at Aztec Labs?
I feel like I've had a few wins that like really stick out over the years. One in particular was getting the award from PR Daily and Business Intelligence Group. So I was working at the time in LA for a company. I had gone from tech out of tech because I was a little tired and needed a little bit of a break. But I found that I was getting bored like relatively quickly. I was working for a company, Saatchi Art, at the time, who is essentially it's similar to Etsy, but like they only sell high end art. And they were doing a campaign for International Women's Day where they were highlighting female artists from all around the world. I've always been really passionate about like getting more women involved in all the spaces, the art space, the tech space, the blockchain space. And so I think it was like a mix of me just being like really a little bit bored in my job. And then also like I was so excited that they were doing like a women a campaign to highlight these women artists. So I took that pitch essentially. And like my goal, I was like, yeah, this is cool. We can get it into like, like some sort of like art specific trade magazine. But I was like, what if we like pitched Ad Age? Like, what if we pitched the campaign as the pitch? And so I looked at like mass, I looked at trade, I looked at, I mean, the New York Times, Ad Age, in addition to all of the art and trade publications as well. And we came up with like separate pitch angles for all of those different publications. For Ad Age specifically, I mentioned like we ended up pitching the campaign as the pitch of like, this is what companies in the space are doing to highlight women artists and entrepreneurs. And they even featured our video. And so that campaign was like completely like bootstrapped. We had no money really behind it. It was literally all pitching. I think the pitch list was like 120 like publications long. And it was super successful. We ended up getting that coverage in Ad Age, which is super rare for this specific kind of like narrative. And then we also got a couple other like really good placements. And yeah, I was really happy with it. But I think like dissecting that narrative helped us a lot. But I think, yeah, going back and like being the fact that we were given an award for how we kind of diced and spliced that narrative and like really, I feel like we squeezed all the juice out of it we could. And I was actually kind of shocked that someone picked up like the campaign as a pitch. But that goes to show like you just never know. Like the worst you can get in PR is a no or a no reply. So you might as well shoot your shot, right?
Are you tired of wrestling with outdated newswire tools that waste your time and budget? Meet BITWIRE. Your news amplified. Sharing your news should be the most celebrated moment in business. As communications professionals and founders, you deserve better than clunky interfaces and confusing pricing models. That's why we've reimagined the newswire for today's PR landscape. With BITWIRE, our AI-assisted tool turns 30 minutes of data entry into less than 5, giving you back your most valuable resource, time. We've eliminated confusing pricing structures. Pay only for what you need when you need it, with progressive discounts when you buy in bulk. Most importantly, we ensure your news reaches premium publishers who matter to your audience, generating high-quality, shareable links that deliver real results. Created by PR professionals who've been there, done that, BITWIRE solves the problems you actually face. And our dedicated support team is ready to assist, even on Mondays. Visit bitwire.com today and discover how the modern newswire can transform your communication strategy and give you your time and sanity back. BITWIRE, your news amplified.
For sure. And congratulations on that award. And also it speaks to, being so thorough and, pitching so many different outlets with different angles. Sometimes that's what it takes to generate that kind of win. I'm curious, maybe you can speak to a little bit of number one, the value of getting placement in outlets outside of crypto for a protocol, and then how do you sort of treat these different audience groups and take approaches to get in front of them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's hugely important that you're not just focused on trade. I think you can get really insular that way, and you almost kind of stop looking at things with fresh eyes if you're just looking at what your own industry is saying. For me, like I think in terms of my working style, I favor the more mass publications. Like I used to always say, like, because I'm not I say I'm non-technical, and when I say that, I mean I'm just like not a developer. I can obviously like talk the talk and walk the walk, and I understand what's going on within my verticals, but I'm still like a non-technical person. So like I like taking really complex technologies and making them, I call them like digestible or into snackable bites. And so for me, like I tend to favor the more mass publications, and like those are more of like my goals. Like if I could get Aztec into the New York Times, like Life Made, like that, those are kind of like my aspirations. And I think it's so important because I think what we're building here, what all of Web3 is building now, it's going to be applicable. It's just a matter of time to a more mass audience. And it's like we're all kind of waiting for that watershed moment, right? Like we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of Ethereum at the end of July. And so it's like, what is the next decade going to look like for us? And I think that we're getting a lot close to kind of piercing that bubble of like where everyone's like talking about Web3. I want to be able to like have my mom or my friends understand like how they can use it, how it's going to impact how they use the internet, things like that. And so looking at asking yourself those questions, and like I know it sounds so cliche, but really knowing your audience. Think about like this publication, this is their main audience. They're going to want to know X, Y, Z. So I should probably have answers for those and get those questions answered. Versus maybe like a CoinDesk who is already well aware of, I guess, like the problem statement of privacy, right? Like you can keep the messaging a bit more high level, and that's going to be more applicable to that audience. But for me, like I think it's so important that we're not just focused on the trades, and that we're also focused on a more like more mass publications, because I don't know. For me, it's about like mass adoption. Again, like one day, like our friends, our parents, they will be somehow like integrated or working with blockchain on the internet. And so I think we're just all kind of, like I said, waiting for that watershed moment. And I don't want to be behind on terms of like educating the more mass audiences on what this tech is and what it's capable of.
That's really interesting. I think it is true of a lot of comms professionals in this space, where it's almost like we're taking on this kind of bigger umbrella goal of not just promoting, our own project, but getting the word out about the value of, Web3 and blockchain, crypto decentralization, to, as you said, this mass audience that they're less, the folks who aren't reading CoinDesk every day, and the way to get in front of them is, of course, to get some material into the outlets that they're paying attention to, they're reading and listening to.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Of course, yes.
I actually think there's like and there's a lot of different audiences, like when I say mass, that like bucket within that. So like our general counsel and legal counsel just pushed out a report on how you can incorporate age verification on the internet today using ZKP. And so like that is relevant to policyholders and the current conversations going on about regulation within the government, not just within the US, but globally. And so like that's just kind of a more direct example of why you can't, I mean, these policymakers they're likely not reading the trade publications, right? And so it's like, how do you get in front of those people? How do you make this technology relevant for them? And I just wanted to add that in as like a really concrete example of what I'm talking about when I say like reach a more mass audience. That's kind of like one example of what a bucket under that mass would look like.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, that's a great example of how this technology applies very directly to the real world. And we've seen how various countries now are looking into sort of gating access to social media platforms, for example. And how do you do that without sort of putting people's data at risk, and making them vulnerable to ID theft and things like that. And that's a very real and important use case for Aztec's technology. So yeah, great example. I'm curious to dig into, because you've worked on both the agency side and in-house at places like Aztec. What are some of those key differences in the experience when it comes to, communications and PR?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have always loved being in-house a bit more than the agency life, and that's like obviously that's no shade on you guys because you guys are so amazing. Personally, like I'm just not good at the admin. I'm not good at logging my hours. And personally, being in-house, I feel like I'm able to understand the technology like the back of my hand versus having like a couple clients thinking about XYZ product launches that are happening that I still have to work on. And so being in-house, I think allows me to really like double click into the educational aspect where I'm learning about the technology. I'm learning about how these networks are built. I'm learning, why XYZ happens when ABC is triggered on the back end of something. And so I don't know. I think for me, I really enjoy being in-house. I also feel like I can establish like really great relationships with the executives, which makes the PR like all that much more easier. If you can quickly get a response from your exec, if you can quickly get comment or quickly get approval on something, that really just makes your job so much easier. And so yeah, I think that I really enjoy being in-house. On the agency front though, I guess like also internally, you're typically like the one comms person or like the one PR person. And so you're doing a lot of, I guess, like to play devil's advocate to my answer just now, like you're doing a lot of stakeholder education of like, well, we need 2 weeks pitching window because XYZ. Or it's like, okay, we need to tighten up this narrative because we're going to be asked questions on ABC. And so I think there's a lot of that has to happen behind the scenes. And I think on the agency front, you just have like more of that sense of community. Like if you're pitching something and you really can't get it placed and you're like, man, I've pitched everyone. I've reworked the pitch multiple times. I followed up 3 times or more with this whole list. You can always reach out to someone within that agency and be like, have you talked to so-and-so? Can you bump this up? And you can likely get coverage if there's like 2 people coming at you from the same angle. And so I think like having that sense of community on the agency side, I do really miss. And it's so fun to have, PR and comms people to talk to on the day-to-day of like, oh yeah, this crazy story happened or, but yeah, so I was just never good at the admin. I don't like logging my hours or things like that. But yeah, the in-house stuff, it's always been where I've been most comfortable, mostly from the perspective of like having that close relationship with the execs, knowing the technology super well, coming up with creative ideas of like how to position their tech. And I don't think I'd be able to do that if I wasn't in-house. But I think there's trade-offs to both. And honestly, I think any PR and comms person needs to do their time in agency and in-house and then like make their own decision of what works for me and why, because there's definitely trade-offs to both and there's definitely like perks to both as well.
That's really interesting to kind of get that assessment of those differences, and yeah, can definitely see the advantage in terms of doing a deeper dive into the tech when you're in-house, and that's kind of the sole focus. And I've got to say that it's an absolute dream to work with people like you on the agency side, since of course you understand PR, and so it just makes our jobs super easy and fun to have you as a collaborator on all of our campaigns and announcements and thought leadership that we're working on. Let's get more into this unique crypto comms landscape that we work in. What are some of the maybe inherent challenges to navigating this special world that we operate in from a comms standpoint?
I mean, there's challenges to every industry. I think in crypto specifically, like folks, I think we're still figuring out like what some of those challenges are, because it feels like it's a relatively new industry. But I mean, it moves really fast. It feels like if like we've been on this call, for what, 45 minutes, and I feel like I'm already probably behind on crypto Twitter. Like something could be going down and we don't know right now. And so I think it moves really fast. That can be a challenge. I think that because the industry hasn't been around that long. And I think, in terms of like how certain test nets or how certain mainnets are launched, I think the community and the ecosystem has been really fixed on like one sort of way to launch a test net or launch a mainnet. And I think we need to understand, like, as an industry, of like there's more than one way just to get the same goal done. So that can be a challenge. It is majority it's definitely kind of like majority male industry, and it's definitely getting better. Like you have your Sheepi, you have your Bara baddies, like you have these concentrated groups now who are actively welcoming more women into this space. And like even at ETH Denver, like I think that narrative of like, where are all the women in blockchain, like that question was just completely smashed, because it does feel like not only there are more, but we're banding together in like the best way possible. And so I think that's been a really nice, I think initially that was a challenge, that it was just like so imbalanced. And now that feels like that's becoming less of a challenge because the community is growing so much. And honestly, like the crypto girlies are so nice, so welcoming. I can go to an event literally by myself and I leave with like 4 or 5 friends who were now friends on Twitter, Telegram, and we're connecting at the next in-person event type of thing. So that is really cool. But yeah, I think from like a comms standpoint, it's just that it moves really fast. Even like on social media, like a lot of projects have to kind of deal with bots of like, how do we measure stuff on the marketing and comm side? How do we measure our success? And what does that look like? Because sometimes like we don't, other than like a lot of people lean on like Twitter analytics, blog views, media impressions and things like that. And those are all really good metrics to have. But like sometimes sometimes projects will not have visibility into like, this person is coming to the network from this exact location. And so we have to work with what we have in terms of metrics. And yeah, I think like dealing with bots can be a challenge across the ecosystem. Crypto Twitter, is like riddled full of them. So kind of pushing like finding the signal within all the noise is another big challenge, because there is a lot of chatter happening at any given point. And so I think it's just figuring out like what you want to focus on in the moment, and using your intuition as well of like, privacy. A couple years ago, people were terrified to touch it. And late last year, like we were all kind of preaching like 2025 will be the year of privacy. And I think that was coming from like, one, a core value of all of ours at Aztec, but two, like you have to use your intuition to a certain extent of like, I think this is going to be where people are focusing the next year. And I think getting that right is really important. And that just comes with time as well.
It's true. Privacy has had a very unique journey, even within the crypto ecosystem. Of it's becoming almost its own category now. You were right in that intuition. That it's becoming a topic of interest this year. But it's been a long road, as you referenced, of having some associations that we had to kind of do some work to overcome, even within the crypto landscape. I'm curious, since you mentioned, crypto Twitter, how do you use, social media, particularly Twitter, to enhance your wins and really, kind of continue the visibility on what you're able to achieve?
I mean, so I went to college for PR, and I remember my professor there was like, if anyone in this room doesn't have a Twitter, like your homework assignment is to go home and set it up. And this was like in if I can even remember, like 2012, maybe 2013. And I was kind of like, I'm never going to use this. But like, I was like, I loved PR. I was in PR SSA, Public Relations Student Society of America. I was on the board. And so I was like, yeah, like, okay, we'll get a Twitter. We'll get it stood up. So I have always kind of I set up my Twitter with the intention years ago that this would be for my professional career. And so I've always kind of used it mostly to engage with reporters. Like we've all been in our first couple of years doing PR where it's like you're doing the hardcore pitching. Like all you're doing all day is like sending pitches and waiting for a reply or even like looking for contact information. And so, a lot of reporters in 2014, 2015 would have their emails in their bio on their Twitter. And they'd be very explicit, like, don't pitch me on Twitter, but you could still find their contact information by like sleuthing. And so I honestly, like at the beginning of my career, that's how I would use it, is like internet sleuthing to like get contact information. And then I feel like the industry kind of evolved where reporters were more accepting or like open to getting pitches like straight on crypto Twitter. And then it kind of became a platform like to just actually engage with them. And so if they post a story, liking it, commenting on it, retweeting it, now I'm more vocal on my Twitter, but I still definitely use it to engage with reporters. So if there's ever a story or a podcast that comes out, like knowing how the reporters work, and they work pretty much against clicks, like you want to support. I look at it as like a partnership when I'm working with a reporter. I never look at it as like I'm getting something from them and they're doing something from me. That's a surefire way to fail in PR. And so I just like with a negotiation, like your teammates, you're collaborating. And so that's how I really look at it working with reporters. And so, they work off clicks. And so you don't want them to write this amazing story and then it falls flat. And internally they're like, oh, can't really write about this again because no one clicked on it. So I want to support them in any way I can. So I will always give them a shout out on Twitter after, just like doing what I can to encourage clicks. Again, trying to be a good partner to them. But now, I'm a bit more vocal on Twitter. I definitely use it to kind of lean into kind of like all of my comms expertise. I do have a lot more comms folks who follow me now, specifically within Web3. And going back to that initial comment I made about like this industry, it feels like you couldn't find any marketer or comms people prior to like 2018. And even that was really, really early within Web3. And now we're at a place where, like we're actually going to these in-person conferences and there's like marketing or comms elements to conferences. And that seems like a huge win for us in our industry. So yeah, I think that's kind of the gist of it for me, but happy to like dive in deeper anywhere in particular.
I mean, that's great that, you set up your Twitter with the intention of using it for corresponding with journalists and to enhance your PR work. That feels pretty unique to me. I'm not sure if many people have had that kind of sort of start to their use of Twitter. So very cool. I guess to dive into a different tool that's become a hot topic as well. How do you use AI in your work day to day? And are there certain challenges with it, or things that stand out as key learnings through your use of AI?
I mean, I think when it first came out, I was like really afraid to even touch it. And then I realized a lot of my like colleagues or friends who are also within comms were using it themselves. And I was like, oh, that's how they're like getting so much done so fast. So then I was like, okay, so I would say I was a late adopter, but then I was like, okay, let me dive more into it and see what it's about, see if it can help, draft newsletters and blogs. And I feel like AI for comms people was almost like really slow to adopt, and then people adopted it, and then there was like a huge fall off, and now people are like lightly using it. That's how I'm kind of going about it. Once I adopted it, after that like initial cliff, I was kind of like, let's just see what it can do. And I was really surprised by how quickly it could like take a blog and write a newsletter from that. And if you're like the only comms person at your company, I think it's okay to repurpose content like that, as long as you're going through and adding your own flair, adding in the company's tone of voice, and making sure it adheres to all of your own comms guidelines, rewriting it so it doesn't feel like you're reading something that's coming from AI. But I think what a lot of companies are pretty strapped for folks internally within Web3. And so I think it's totally okay to use it as like a supplemental way. Now I use it a bit less. I feel like I will still use it in that way as like a supplemental tool. So I won't use it to like write the announcement, but I'll use it to support additional announcement comms, like a newsletter or a tweet or something like that. And again, like you're getting in there after the fact and massaging it as much as you can, adding in your company's tone of voice and making sure it adheres to all your comms guidelines, or else people can't tell it's written by AI. Now I think I think we're still kind of like at the beginning to see like what AI has in future for our industry, because like even reporters now, like with op-eds, like they will run the op-eds through tools that basically check to see if it's written by Chat GPT. And if it's over, I think it's like 11%, they won't even publish it. And so I think we'll have to keep a pulse on what others in the industry are doing and how they're using AI and continue to evolve with it. But yes, I think people, especially if you're a one person show, like use your resources, be scrappy. But just don't, like I said, don't use it for the announcement, use it for the supplemental comms that need to go with it. That's kind of how I use it now, but I'm really interested to see what the future has in hold in terms of like AI capabilities. Like I know this year, visual, like the Biblies, like that was like a huge thing. And so I think we're moving from like written AI to visual AI. I'm really excited to see how that kind of pans out and improves and evolves over the next couple of months. But yeah, I don't think AI is going anywhere. Yeah, I think it's here to stay. I think it was even at like the Stripe conference, they said like in a year, every person in this room will have their own AI agent. And so I think that's just a really interesting way to look at it. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we got to find a way to work with it. And if you're like me, like how I was in the beginning where I was slow to adopt, like don't be like that, because everyone else is using it. Everyone else is getting ahead of you and you're just being left behind if you're not able to basically like put out as much as like other comms people are. You're just going to fall behind. You're not going to be able to keep up. So find a way to use your resources and just do it in an ethical way.
Really well said about using AI as a tool, not as a replacement. And if you can be effective in using it as a tool, it can really enhance your productivity, especially as you said, if you're, a one-person show, in-house somewhere. Amazing. Well, Kelsey, this has been such an insightful conversation. So many, takeaways for fellow professionals in this industry. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to share with our listeners in terms of advice, or please also share how people can stay up on what you're doing, and keep track of your wins too?
Yeah. I guess I'll leave with like two like phrases that I was taught like throughout PR conferences very early on in my career that I feel like have just really stayed tried and true. One is like, your reputation is everything. Your network is your net worth. Be kind to everybody that you meet in the industry, and that'll take you a really, really long way. And then, keeping up with me, you can follow me on Twitter, at Kelsey Ruiz _. I tweet frequent Aztec updates. And also I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. Happy to connect with any folks in the ecosystem.
Fantastic. Kelsey, this has been an absolute joy to talk with you as always. And we really appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by BITWIRE.com, the modern newswire reimagined for today's comms professionals. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter at proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.